G'day mate, 40 here. So I've been reading a new book by Greene, The Daily Laws. So at age 36, he got the idea of writing the 48 Laws of Power. And then he wrote a book on the laws of seduction, and I think he might have written one on the laws of persuasion. So he definitely found his niche. And so the Daily Laws is like a compendium of his work, his blog posts, his interviews with laws for every day. And I'm just about five chapters into it. And he talks about, in day number 1, the importance of finding your life's task. And so I found that challenging, like how would I explain my life's task? And I thought, well, a lot of people have told me I was born to blog. And so is blogging my life's task? No, that doesn't sound quite right. And then I think my life's task is to observe life and to interview people and to give my opinion, right? So maybe it's to explain life. Perhaps that's my life's task. And so he talks about, what were your childhood enthusiasms? And so some people who know me remember that I love sports. Well, that really only developed after I moved to the United States at age 11. But I could talk for hours about sports. Now, this was before I actually watched sports, because we didn't have a TV back then. This is just from reading all the back issues of Sports Illustrated and Time, Life, Newsweek magazines, and reading books. So a lot of adults told me that I knew more about sports than any other kid. But this was all from reading, not from watching. So somehow something about sports really appealed to me. So I guess I'm very interested in power and winning and losing and competition. Competition was a dirty word in my upbringing. In my Seventh-day Adventist upbringing, competition was bad. But I love competition. So I guess trying to understand life and explain life, I guess that's my life task. And so what were my childhood enthusiasms? I think I always loved giving my opinion. I loved giving my opinion. I always had lots of opinions to retail. So my second grade teacher, and I did not enter school on a regular basis until second grade. So in my first report card it said, Luke is always very willing to share his opinion with the class, but he needs to learn to be more patient with the slower thinker. And that's me. I'm still very willing to share my opinion. So I think if you're trying to find your life's task, Robert Greene's right, you want to connect back to your childhood enthusiasms. And so I had this huge enthusiasm for sharing my opinion. I also had a huge enthusiasm for taking the mickey out of people and making people laugh. And I don't want to analyze why I love taking the mickey out of people and why I love cracking people up, because it just seems to take the joy and the pleasure out of it. But from a young age, I loved taking the mickey out of people, certain people, not everyone, and I loved cracking people up, being the class clown. So I was a class clown in school, and I'm still the class clown on YouTube, so that's kind of a through line. I loved sharing my opinion as a kid, and I love sharing my opinion as an adult. So my childhood enthusiasms were reading books, sharing my opinion. I love competition, love power, love politics, love learning about great men, love biographies, love winners and losers, love competition, analyzing competition, why one side won and the other side lost, winners and losers. Yeah, that's what I'm passionate about. So yeah, try to plug in what are your childhood enthusiasms and try to recapture that. So loved reading about power, and I loved sharing my opinion, and I loved provoking people. Oh, I loved challenging authority. Even as a child, I had a sense that authority was sometimes capricious, sometimes egotistical, sometimes abusive, sometimes not based on very solid foundations. And And so from a very early age, I was kind of very eager to challenge authority. So I had teachers who said that I challenged them more than any other student. So I've had a lot of teachers said that. So yeah, I guess there's a childhood enthusiasm, challenging authority, taking the mickey out of people, making people laugh, seeing the absurdity around me, pricking and puncturing pomposity. I hate BS, and I love debunking nonsense. So I guess that was a childhood enthusiasm as well. I just love debunking nonsense. Love taking on authority. I had a very high estimation of my own abilities. So a lot of confidence in certain areas in connection with verbal IQ. I love to write. So that's the third line. I love seeing the impact of my words on people, whether written or spoken. So I enjoy the power and influence that comes with being good with words. So that was a childhood enthusiasm. I loved entertaining people. So I remember I used to do this high school show for local community access program, and it was interesting. The first show I did, I spent like 8 hours typing it up, and the class just hated it. They just tuned out like right away. I lost them right away, and so I had to perform it during class, and they had to just like sit there and listen. And I was just recounting all the sports news for that Sunday, and the class hated it. And then other days I do a show with much less preparation, and they were laughing and they were like having a good old time. So that was an important lesson. My connection does not necessarily depend upon how much work that I'm doing, right? And connection needs to happen in the first few seconds of an interaction, at least certainly the first minute. And if it doesn't happen then, right, you're in big trouble. Like you lose an audience very quickly. So I remember those shows where everyone was cracking up, where everyone was like listening to what I had to say and laughing, and so I enjoyed entertaining. So when I'm happy, I tend to be outgoing. I tend to be the life of the party. I tend to be charming. I tend to like kind of draw people in and connect and outgoing. But if I lack confidence, then that disappears. I'm quiet and miserable. So happy Luke is outgoing, confident, charming. Uncertain, insecure Luke is the opposite. So I always enjoyed those times when I could entertain people, hold their attention, and had enough times where I failed to hold their attention. I remember how kind of humiliating that was. So I think this is a really valuable lesson from Robert Greene's book, The Daily Laws. Like, tune in to your childhood impulses. Right? There's childhood impulses to opine, to entertain, to take the mickey out of people, to challenge authority. I hated BS, right? I hated lies and nonsense, and pious lies in particular. I hated the abuse of authority. I hated conventional wisdom that was phony and self-interested. And so, yeah, I think just thinking about these things gives me energy. So if you can connect to those childhood impulses and find some way to apply them or exercise them in the present moment, I think that could be awesome. Like, it could be an awesome sense of energy and power to connect to those childhood impulses. So for me, it was to charm, to entertain, to compel, to provoke, to amuse, to learn, to investigate, to discover, to share with the world what I've learned. So these primitive impulses, these childhood impulses, all right? This is like the fair dinkum stuff. This is not imposed on you by society, and this is not you using your brain at age 55 to try to figure out how to make a buck. But if you can tap into those childhood impulses, then you can find a source of energy and inspiration and something that you're passionate about and you're going to likely be fairly good at, because to be good at anything, it usually requires energy. I think energy means tapping into what's primal, what's instinctual. We all have basic impulses towards some things and away from other things. So I hated the pious and the pompous and the shallow and the unintelligent, and I've always loved high intelligence and success and winning and competition and provocation and laughter